I'm Rob Port from SayAnythingBlog.com. Education policy, of course, always an important issue, and we all agree that we should be providing an education for our kids, but there's endless debate over how we go about providing that education. Before the North Dakota legislature this session, there's a bill, HB 1466, introduced by Representative Mark Dosch, which would give parents or would empower parents to make more choices about education for their kids. I have Representative Dosch with me. Representative, tell us about your bill.
Well, thank you, Rob, for having me. Basically, what the bill does is quite simply, it allows the local school districts to contract with non-public schools to provide educational services for the students that attend that school. To give you an example, every year, for example, the school boards contract with teachers to teach at the various public schools we have throughout the state. This would allow them to contract with a non-public school to provide, in which case they would be, the non-public school would be reimbursed 25% of the cost to educate that child. So, for example, if take Shiloh, they could contract with the Bismarck Public School District to provide educational services to those kids, and the DPI would actually then send the funds to Shiloh to help pay for 25% of those educational costs.
And the 25% you're talking about, that's 25% of what the state would have paid to have that student in a public school?
Absolutely. If you send your child to a public school, roughly today, it costs the state, between the state and local funds, about $10,000 to educate that child. Here, if they go to non-public, it would cost the state only $2,500. So in essence, for every kid that moves from public to non-public, would save the taxpayers of North Dakota $7,500.
Now, how are these contracts initiated? Because as I read the law, it would allow the parents to initiate that, meaning, the parent notifies the superintendent of their school that they want to send their child to a private school, and then at which point DPI ends up sending 25% of that student's share of public education dollars to that school, but it's all initiated by the parent. Am I understanding that correctly?
That's correct. Absolutely. Yep.
Now,
easy process.
Okay, go ahead.
No, just a very easy process. They just notify the school district. The school district then compiles, the total number of students and submits that to DPI, and the local school district is out of it. And it's important, Rob, to understand that this is being funded by general fund dollars. It's not being funded by any of the state aid to schools. It's not being funded by any property taxes or anything like that. So for the local school district, it is completely a revenue neutral transaction. Doesn't affect them one bit or their funding.
Now, let me ask you this question: what about homeschoolers? Are homeschoolers, because in the bill, I think it refers to any school that meets the compulsory education requirements set out in state law. Obviously, homeschooling meets those requirements. Does this mean that homeschoolers could get a portion of that money?
No, unfortunately not. Homeschoolers, the way they are set up and recognized by the state, the section that they're included in code, it defines home ed students or home education as a program and not as a school in the state. So therefore, they would not be included in this bill.
How what sort of, some people are saying that some of the opposition or some of the criticism of this bill that I've heard notes that the state constitution has a provision in it which disallows any funding for quote unquote, I think the term used is sectarian schools, which would mean schools with religious affiliations, Protestant, Catholic, what have you. Do you see that part of the state constitution being problematic for your bill?
No, not at all. There's two sections in the Constitution that I'd like to draw your attention to. First, Section 1, it basically directs the legislature to establish a system of public schools that are free from sectarian control. So, and we have that. Our Department of Public Instruction, DPI, has established a system of schools in our state. They are in control of those schools. So it doesn't affect Section 1 at all. The other section is Section 5 of the Constitution, and this is where you have to kind of read and understand the Constitution very closely, because the Constitution says that no money raised for the support of public schools shall be appropriated or used for the support of any sectarian school. Now, the key is there, it says, where it says no money raised for the support of public schools. That means we cannot use property taxes, because property taxes are an element of, you have some money in your property taxes that are raised for educational purposes. We can't use state foundation aid money, which is specifically used for education. My bill does not use either one of those funds of pools of money. It comes out of general fund dollars, which means that constitutionally it's not an issue.
Now let me ask you this question, because earlier you had said that this bill is revenue neutral. Does that mean that the money which goes to which goes to these private schools, that is not coming away from the existing public schools, that's a new appropriation out of the general fund?
Rob, it is a new appropriation out of the general fund, but what you must understand that it is the state's obligation by our Constitution that we are to provide free education to our children. What this bill does, and the other thing you have to remember is North Dakota, we are in a growing mode right now. In fact, by some estimates, they say within 10 years, we're going to have somewhere between 10 and 20,000 new kids on our education system, or entering into our education system. So if you want to do a little math, even if we take the lowest number of that, just assume that these 10,000 kids are all going to go to public school, and the cost per student is $10,000. That means that within a matter of a few years, the state could be spending upwards of $100 million new dollars on education, and $200 million a biennium. So if we don't do anything, the cost to the state is going to be astronomical by the addition of these new kids coming on. So it would seem only logical to me as a state lawmaker, as for someone from North Dakota to say, man, whatever we can do, if we can provide a little bit of incentive, and that's what this bill does. It just provides a 25% incentive for parents to say, you know what, if you move your kids over to non-public, we'll give that choice. It helps make more of a choice for those parents. The state's going to save 75% of the cost to educate that student. And where this bill is revenue neutral is if just 2% of our existing students, and we educate in the state now about 107,000 kids, if just 2% of those move from public to non-public, we are going to save the state about $16 million a year, or about $32 million a biennium, which is exactly what my bill is going to cost when you look at new general fund dollars. So by doing this, what we're actually doing is saying, we're providing a little bit of incentive, so it's good for the state to get these kids to move over and end up saving ourselves a lot of money.
Now, what about, have you taken into account the students who are already in private schools? I mean, if, for instance, somebody who may have children in a Catholic school, for instance, already, is this available to them as well? And have you calculated that into your cost for your bill?
Yes, the cost of the bill. In fact, that's the largest cost of the bill is moving those all the kids now in non-public schools over to this system. That's where the $32 million would come in. But to pay for that, you simply need about 2,020 new students coming into the non-public system. And just the savings to the state by just these 2,020 kids generates enough savings to pay for it for the entire almost 7,000 kids that we now have in non-public schools in the state.
Representative Dosch, thank you for your time.
You bet.